Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar on Introduction to APA7 Referencing. My name's Michael. I'm a librarian at the University Library. Today I'm at Newspace, and I'm joined by my colleague, Jessica Davis, also at Newspace today. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work. So that's around the south side of Newcastle Harbour and the university's Newcastle City campus, the Awabakal and Worimi people. And I would like to pay my respects to the wisdom of elders past and present, and extend my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Now, first up, just a little bit of housekeeping. In the webinar today, we are going to be using the Q&A function. So if you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to pop questions in there. Jess will be keeping an eye on that, and she can answer questions or stop me and we can talk about things as well. So please put anything you have in the Q&A, and we'll see how we're going with the chat. I don't think it's functioning, but Jess might also put some links in the chat if that's working as well. Yeah, so what we're going to be talking about today is APA7 referencing. So firstly, we're going to talk about some general referencing things. So what is referencing? Why do we do it? A little bit of talk about different referencing styles. And then we're going to focus in on APA7. So we're going to be looking at APA7 as it is one of the most common styles that we use at the university. And it's used across all disciplines. So there's a good chance that you'll be using APA7 during your studies here. And we have a lot of help resources at the library for APA7. So that's why we're concentrating in on that style. So then when we get to that APA7 style, we're going to look at in-text citations, reference list entries, and how to reference some of the common resource types in APA7. And of course, we'll show you how to get some referencing help. So there's always more referencing help after this session from the library as well. Okay, so what is referencing? Really referencing, we're just talking about a structured way of giving credit to the original author or creator. So when you use information, when you're doing an assignment, you might do some research, you find some information that you need to use. It's giving credit to the author or creator of that information. And referencing styles are just a structured way of doing that, a formalized way of doing that. And this is really important as it enables other people to find the source that you've used. So there's enough information in that reference that if someone wants to do some further reading on that topic, they can go and find that resource, see it in context, find any more information about that topic that that original author had used. So having enough information for people to go and find that original source is really important. It demonstrates that you've done research. So for your markers and anybody reading your work, they can see that you've researched, read widely. They can see if you're using the really important resources and ideas that are in your sort of subject or your topic that you're studying. So it shows that research and preparation. And that leads into the next point, which is really important for your markers. Referencing is compulsory in nearly all university assignments, and it's worth marks. So that's a good enough reason to get your referencing right and make sure that sort of get used to doing it. So it just becomes a normal part of your academic life. You're always, when you're researching, you're keeping track of your references, putting them in, and you're collecting those marks that are on your assignment in that rubric every time. And the last point on this list, but definitely not the least, is referencing is part of practicing academic integrity and avoiding plagiarism. So this is obviously a really important part of university and academic life. You need to acknowledge other people's work you don't want to be passing that off as your own work. And referencing is the way that you show that and practice that academic integrity. So it's really important piece, part of your academic life that way as well. So that's why we are referencing. Now, as I said, it is just a formalized way of, when we're talking about referencing styles, it's just a formalized way, sort of a convention of how we are going to acknowledge that original author or creator. And there's a number of different styles that we use at University of Newcastle. We have APA7, which we're going to be speaking about today, Chicago A and B, Vancouver, Harvard, AGLC. So there's lots of different styles and there's many more. And we do offer support for these other styles at the university as well. So things like Vancouver, you might get in a health-based subject. Harvard, you might get in a humanities subject. AGLC is a law referencing style, and IEEE, you might get in engineering. So there's all these different styles, and really you should be told by your lecturer which style you need to use. It will normally be in your course outline or on your assessment information. It will set out what referencing style you're expected to use. And yeah, you will be sort of told, and in most subjects, you'll be getting the same referencing style in most subjects. So if you are using APA7, you'll be using it a lot throughout your course or your degree. Now, if you are unsure which style you need to be using, that is something that you should check with your lecturers about. Make sure you are using the style that's expected. And very occasionally, this doesn't happen very often, but sometimes you will get a lecturer who says, I don't mind what style you use, just make sure it's consistent. It doesn't happen often, but if you are in that situation where you get to choose a referencing style, I think at the library we would recommend APA7. It is an easy style to use, and we do have a lot of help resources available for it. So APA7 is a good option. Yeah, there is lots of information out there that can help you with your referencing. Now we are going to concentrate on APA7. And as I said, mostly that is because of how widely used it is and just the help resources that we have available for it. Now, the help that we have is set out in our referencing guides. Now, we actually have two levels of guides now. We have a quick guide. So this is a way to quickly look at how to reference the most common resource types. And we have full guides, so a more detailed, lots of examples, some of the more unusual things that you might come across. So you can use a combination of these two levels of guide. And I will just show you now, I'm going to go to the library homepage, and I will just show you how to access those guides. So this is the library homepage. They are under this Learn menu here. And you can also go down to this Learn menu here, and it's the referencing link there. Both ways will get you to the same place. Now, these blue squares at the top, these are the quick guides that I mentioned. So this is the really common examples. So we have quick guides for these three styles at the moment, for APA, Chicago, and Vancouver. The other referencing styles, these links here will take you directly to the full guides for those styles. Whereas for these guides, these styles with the blue boxes, you'll go into the quick guide first with the option to link on to the full guide. So for APA7, if we go in here, this is what the quick guides look like. And you can see they are set out by resource type. So the way that you reference things will depend on what type of resource that you're referencing. You also get some information about the in-text citations, and we're going to talk about that soon. And down the bottom, this is another good one to note, are the style notes. So in here, there are some general notes about the APA7 style. So things like the reference list. So you can access those things. And the link to the full guide is up the top and also down the bottom here. This will take you through to the full APA7 guide, which looks a bit like this. So you can see we have a lot more resource types. So some of the more unusual ones, we have health specific, if you're education resources, images and tables. So there's a lot more different resource types that we have information on here. And then within each resource type, we have a little bit more information too. So just duck back into the quick guide. So for instance, if we were looking at journal articles here, in the quick guide, we get some templates for what the reference list entry would look like and some examples. If we look at the full guide, we'd go to articles, so exactly the same way. This time we get some more choice about how many authors the article has. We have in-press systematic reviews, so just that little bit more detail. Also, a good thing to note in the full guide is we do have video tutorial links. So there's not a video for each resource type, but keep a lookout. The main resource types like articles, books, web resources will have a video tutorial, which is a really great resource as well. So that will take you how to do a reference for those particular types of resources. Another really great function on the full guide is the guide index. So if you have a resource type and you're not sure which section it would fall under, you can do a search. So if you were looking for a YouTube video, for instance, you could look that up and that will take you to how to reference a YouTube video. So using the index is really great as well. Okay. So we've sort of delved into it a little bit already, but when we're talking about referencing, we're talking about a process that has two steps in your article. So when you're writing, you will need an in-text part to the reference, which sits in your writing that points to a reference list entry. So that is the full detail of the resource that you're using that will sit in a list at the end of your document. So there are those two parts. Now, you might hear the terms reference, citation, in-text reference, in-text citation. People use them sort of interchangeably, but really what we're talking about when we talk about referencing, referencing is the whole process. And then we have in-text citations and then reference list entries. So that's how we're going to talk about it today, the two parts, in-text citation and reference list entry. So the first part are the in-text citations. So you need to use an in-text citation every time that you use information or an idea that is not your own. So that's basically anytime you're getting information from something you've read or watched, any other source, and using it in your assignment, you need to put an in-text citation there to acknowledge where you've got that information. And the sort of rule of thumb that people talk about is anything that's not common knowledge, you need to reference. So that's when you're going to put that in-text citation in your paper. Now there's two different types. So there's for paraphrasing and direct quotes. So paraphrasing is when you're taking the information that you've read, you're working that idea into your narrative using your own words. You're not copying the words from the paper exactly. You're paraphrasing. So when you're paraphrasing, you need in-text citations, and you also need them if you're using a direct quote. That's actually taking a block of text verbatim from another source, putting it in quotation marks, So for both situations, you would need an in-text citation. And as I've mentioned, that in-text citation will then point to an entry in the reference list. Now, APA7 is an author date style, which means that the in-text citation will include the author's name and the date of publication. They are the two main pieces of information that you will include in your in-text, no matter what resource type you're using. So for a video, a journal article, a book, any type of resource, you need to include the author and date. So that's the general rule. So if I should say too, if you're using another style, so not APA, not all styles are author date. There might be some numbered styles where you're just putting a number in the text. That will still works the same way. You have that in-text part and then a reference list entry part. It's just APA7, we're using that author date style. So here are some examples of some in-text citations. The top two, so we've got parenthetical and narrative. These are two ways of citing when you're paraphrasing. So that's reworking somebody else's idea or concepts into your own words. So the top one, this is just your basic, the standard way of referencing. You've used the idea, so sampling based on the grounded theory model formed the basis for data analysis. And then at the end of that sentence, you're putting the author's name and the date into brackets. That's why it's called parenthetical. It's just within the parentheses. You'll notice that this has come from, I'm not sure what it is. We'd have to look at the reference list entry to see what type of resource it is, but it has more than 3 authors, so 3 or more authors. That's why they've put et al. Into the citation, et al. Just meaning and others. And that's something that you can use if your resource has 3 or more authors. So we have Endicott et al. 2019. That's our citation there. The next one down is what we call a narrative citation. And this is where you've worked the author's names into the narrative of your writing. So something like Lewandowski and Whitmarsh suggests that rising sea levels are a reliable measure of climate change. So because the author's names are outside the brackets, we only need to include the date of publication in the brackets. So it's another way of putting an in-text citation in. Now the third one here is a direct quote. And this is where you've taken somebody's text exactly. You can see it's got the double quotation marks around this phrase. So attributed to, and then the quote, burning fossil fuels, agriculture, and land clearing. And now this citation is referencing the Department of the Environment and Energy. And then we have ND para 2. So there's a couple of things in there. The first thing is the difference with a direct quote is you need a locator at the end of your in-text citation. So if this is in a journal article or a book, you would use a page number. For this one, because it's from a website, doesn't have page numbers, we have a paragraph, so para 2. It's just a locator so that someone can find that exact quote in the text. The other thing is that this one, we don't have the name of a person. So this is what we'd call a corporate author. So it's the name of the organization who's authored that material. We don't have a particular person's name. So this one is from the Department of the Environment and Energy. Yeah, it could be from any organization, company, government, and we would refer to that as a corporate author. So there could be corporate authors for any type of resource, but they're very common for websites. A lot of the time when you're getting information from the web, you're not getting an actual individual person. And the other part of this in-text is that we have ND here. ND just stands for no date, and that's where the date is not available for us. it's not published. The date hasn't been published on that web page. And again, that's really common for web pages. They don't have a date. Okay. And when you are looking for the date, we'll get to this later when we talk about the reference list entries, but the date is actually a publication date. So not a copyright date that you see down the bottom of a website where it says, you know, copyright 2022, like everything's been copyrighted this year. That's not the publication date when that information has been put on the website. You need to find a publication date. And if it doesn't have that, that's when you can use that n.d. for no date. Really common for web pages. Any questions so far, Jess? How are we going?
No questions so far.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, feel free to pop anything in the Q&A as we go along. Just before we head on to the reference list entries, I might just show you in the guide where you would find that information. So here I'm on the quick guide for APA7. And in this first tab here, we have a section on in-text citations. And you can see we have options for different numbers of authors. So for a single author, for 2 authors, or for 3 or more authors, and then information on direct quotes. So it's all written in there. Here's an example with a page number. This one's actually a page range where the quote has gone across a page. So it's page 57 to 58. So all of this information of how to format your in-text is available here. Again, you can, on the full guide, you can go into the in-text citations. And we actually have an example paragraph where you can see those citations within some writing. Okay. And as you can see in the quick guide here, we just have one section for in-text citations, and that's because it doesn't matter what type of resource you're using, those in-text citations will be the same. Okay, so that's where you would access that information in the guides. Okay, now the second part of the reference after the in-text is the reference list entry. So the reference list entry has the full details of the resources cited in the in-text citations. So the in-text just has the author and the date. For someone to be able to go and find your resource that you've used, you need to have all of the information. So that will depend on the type of resource that you're using, but you might need an access URL, you might need the name of the book, the name of the journal article. There's lots of information that they might need to go and find that resource. So the reference list entry is where you can put that information. Now, a reference list will go at the end of your document on a new page, and you'll arrange all of the references that you've used for that assignment in alphabetical order. So you just have one reference list for your entire document arranged in alphabetical order. Now, the format for the reference list entry for each individual entry will depend on the type of resource that you're referencing. And that's why we've set those guides out based on resource type. So you would just go into the relevant resource. Okay. So the first one that we're going to look at here is for a journal article. So here you can see the format. So this is like a template or a recipe, all of the different things you need to put in to make a reference for a journal article. And here we have an example. So the things to be aware of, when it comes to this part of referencing, it's really just about those details. So everything here is important. The capitalization. So we have capitals for the author's surname and initial, capitals for the first word of the article, but not every word. So that's what we call sentence case. It's just the first letter is capitalized, and then the first letter of the subtitle is capitalized. It's also things like italics. So there is different parts of the reference that need italics. Here it is the journal title and the volume. And the punctuation. So commas, full stops, colons, it's all part of the referencing style. Another thing that you'll see here is the first line of the reference is aligned to the left of the page. All the subsequent lines, so down here, are set in from the edge. And that's what we call a hanging indent. And I will show you how to make a hanging indent in Microsoft Word. And when you're doing your referencing, it's just a matter of having the guide open, looking at the format that you're using, finding the different parts of information, so the name, the year, the title, the journal title, and then putting them into the format. You'll also see we have this section, which is a DOI. A DOI is a digital object identifier. It is basically just a numerical tag that gets given to mostly online journal articles, but it could be books as well. And it's just a stable, it's a permanent link. Doesn't matter if the article changes publishers or websites, it will always have the same DOI that's attached to it. So it's a really good way for people to find it. So always look to see if your resource has a DOI. And you'll see in the formats that most require a DOI if it's available. Okay, so we might actually have a look now at doing a reference. So I have this article that's available in Library Search. And I have this information here. And I actually should be able to do the reference without going into the article. I should have enough information here. Now I'm going to use the APA7 guide from the library. It's a journal article. So firstly, I would go to the journal articles section and look down at these different formats. Now you can see the first option here is an article with a DOI. So that is the first thing that I'm going to check to see if it has that DOI, digital object identifier. There are options for if it doesn't have a DOI, but that's the first thing that I'm going to check. And it could have a DOI even if it's a print object. Okay, so I'll go here. Now, if you go to the article and look on the cover page, you will find all of that information, but I should be able to get it from here as well. I can't see a DOI on this section, but you can use this quick look, which has a little bit more of the metadata about the article. And this is a good place to look for DOIs. So if I scroll down here, I can see this one does have a DOI. So that's the format that I will use for the reference. Okay, so again, checking it. Now the first information that I need is the author's surname and their initial. So up here, we have 3 authors. So I can copy that. And I'm just going to pop this into a Word doc. Okay. Now I do have to format it in APA style. So it is surname, initial, full stop, comma, and the same again. And here I need the ampersand for and, Harris and. So they're my 3 authors. So Welch, Alfrey, and Harris. Okay. I'll again check my guide. So I've got, and you can use the formats, but you can also use the examples here. So I can see down here, I've got the initial full stop, comma, then the second surname, comma, initial full stop, comma, and Chowdhury. So that's the exact same situation as mine with the 3 authors. So that's what I want to replicate. Now, the next information I need is the date. So I will look for the year of publication, and I have 2021. So in brackets, 2021, close brackets, full stop. Again, check the guide. Now the next thing I need is the article title and subtitle. So I can copy the title there. Okay, and it looks like it's capitalized correctly. I've got the first letter capitalized. Australia needs a capital as well, but that all looks good. And then the next part of the information that I need is the journal title, volume, and issue. So down here, I have Sport, Education, and Society. Oh, let me get all of it. Now this, if I check the guide, I can see it does need to be in italics, so I can do that. Also, every word of the journal title needs to be capitalized. I can see that in the template and then down here in the examples as well. So I need capitals there, so I'll fix that up. Education and Society. And then it's volume 26, issue 5. And then I need a comma and then the page range. So I can get the page range here. Now, I did notice that on the template, I don't need spaces before and after that hyphen. So I'll take them out. And then I need a full stop. So it's just making sure that I'm getting everything there at once. You can see that there's no space between the volume and the brackets for issue. So I'll just check that I've got that right. And now I'm going to go back and put that journal title and volume in italics. Now the last part is to put in the DOI. And you can see it has this HTTPS format for the DOI. So it's actually a hyperlink, a working link. So I can copy that part that I need. Now with the hyperlinks in APA, you can make them like blue with underlined like a hyperlink or just plain text. But if they're being read online, they should be working links so that whoever's reading can access that document. And I'll get the DOI from down here. And I got to the starting from the number 10. So I'll paste that there. Okay. And I want that. I would make that also, it's the link is the whole link there. Okay. So that is my journal reference entry. Do we have any questions about that one, Jess?
No questions so far.
Okay. Now you can see it's actually put this into a hanging indent for me, which is really good. That's because I had a citation in this document before. But if I needed to put one in, what I would do is put my cursor at the front of the citation, which is basically this the front of the paragraph. And there is a keyboard shortcut, which is Control-T. It's Control-Shift-T to remove that hanging indent again. If you're on a Mac, Command-T will work. There is also a section in the paragraph section of Word where you can come here, and in the indentation section, you can select hanging. Okay, so that will put it in as well. So it's a really good idea to use that hanging indent function rather than using tabs or spaces. If you use the hanging indent, it will save you so much formatting trouble. It really is the best thing when you're doing an APA7 reference list. Use that hanging indent. So Control-T, or use the hanging indent from the paragraph drop-down box here. It will save you so much trouble. Yeah, so definitely use that. Now, while we're getting the reference list set up, we need a heading. So as I mentioned, you'd start your reference list on a new page. And the heading that you need in APA7 is just the word references. It should be bolded and centered. Okay, so that is the setup now for our reference list. All right, so I'll head back to, so that's a journal article. And there are those different variations that you'll come across. So always just refer back to the guide and look for those different variations. Now, the next type that we'll look at is book. So you'd use this for a hard copy book or an ebook. It's a lot of the same information. Again, look for those details. You can see some of the differences. This one, you'll be looking for an edition and a publisher as well. And obviously you don't need that information about volume and issue and page number like you would for a journal article. So down here in the example, this one is the second edition. It's published by Oxford Scholarship Online, and it has a DOI as well. So books also can have DOIs. And you can see in this, it's the title of the book, which needs to be in italics. So again, I've got an example here from Library Search. And I'll head across to the book section of the guide. So again, we're going to be doing the ebook, so a version with a DOI. That's the example that we'll be using. Okay, again, I can use the quick look to get that extra information. This one does have a DOI as well. So the first information I need is the author's name. Now I'm putting my reference list in alphabetical order. So this author starts with a K, so I'll put it in up here. Now, Kaja has an unusual first name. She has a hyphenated first name. So what I would do is put the full stop here and then the hyphen V dot comma. So if you get an unusual name like that or a hyphenated name, you can check the in-text section of those guides to see what you should do. And we just have one author, so I don't need a comma there. The next step is the date. So I'm looking for the year. And it is published in 2021. So bracket, close bracket, full stop. The next information I need is the title of the book and the edition. So I'll go back here. I'll get the title of the book. Just pull that. The Popular and the Sacred in Music. Now I'll look for the edition. So I can see here that this is actually the first edition. So you only need to put the edition in if it's the second or subsequent editions. If it's the first edition, you don't need to put any edition information. So that is all written in the guide. You'd go to if you wanted to check that type of thing out, you'd go to books and theses in the full guide, and you can see these general rules, and there's some rules about the edition. So only include if it's second edition or above. So you can check all of those rules there. So I don't need the edition. The next thing that I need is the publisher. So I'll grab Routledge from there. Okay, I've gone a bit off with my fonts. Just make sure that's all the same. Routledge. And then the final thing that I need is the DOI. I will need to make the title into italics as well. So I'll grab the DOI. Now I need to format it in the same way as this one, so I can grab this here and put that into the DOI. And I'll make the title into italics. And there we have a book reference. Okay, so that's the way to be using the guides to do that. And we have one final reference type to look at. So the final one is a web page. So for a web page, we have this one, as I explained before, we're using a corporate author because this example that I've got here is from the United Nations. It doesn't have an individual person. The differences here with the web page, or one of the differences here is you can see in the date that we have year, month, and day. That's because web pages are a little bit more dynamic. They're changing more often. So having a month and day there is really important. And we also have a URL, so a web address instead of a DOI. Okay, so just to go into the web page here, so this is the one that I've used for the example. So this here, we can see this is the owner of this web page, the United Nations. They're the corporation or organization responsible for this web page. So it's the United Nations that I'd be using as the author. Now for the title of this page, it is the title of this actual page, the page that we're reading. So who recommends 2 new life-saving medicines to treat Ebola? So it's important to think about the difference between the website and the web page. The website would be the whole website of the United Nations, all of those different pages that make up that site. We are referencing the page. So just this particular page with the article that we're reading. So the title would be this one here. So keep that in mind that you're referencing the web page. And if you use multiple pages from a website, you would need a separate reference list entry for each of those different pages. Now we do have a date here, so we can use this as the publication date. If it doesn't have a date here, that's when we can use that n.d. for the no date. So there are a couple of the differences to look for in websites. And again, if you're going to the guide, you would look at the website's social media section, see the web page authored by a person or with a corporate author. So we were using this one here. So there's examples there. Also remember, there's lots of different types of resources that you can find online. So check first whether it is a journal article or a government report or a video. if it's one of those other resource types, you can reference it as that resource type. Only when it's nothing else more specific, then you'd go back to using a website. So just make sure that it's not a more specific type of resource before you reference it as a website. Okay, so they are the reference types that I wanted to go through today. Are there any questions on those, Jess?
No questions have come through.
Cool. All right, now just to wrap up for today, of course, you can always ask questions later too. So we have lots of great help channels. If you have quick referencing questions, like something, I'm not sure what type of resource this is, chat is the really great thing to use, library chat. We also have Book a Librarian, where you can have a consultation with library staff and you can share your screen, we can help you with your referencing. We can't mark your referencing or say whether it's right or wrong. That is your job as students, but we can help you if you have questions about how to interpret the guides, what type of resource you're looking at. And if you're not understanding how you should be referencing, definitely come and ask those questions and we can help. So I'll just quickly show you how to access that information. So from the library homepage, you can use this Ask the Library. Library chat is here, so you can type in a question, get that quick response, or you can book a librarian here. They're great ways to get in touch with us. I will also just show you our other referencing support. So if you go into the webinars section, and you may have already done that because you have booked this webinar or you're watching it online. So we have previous webinars here. And actually next week we have a webinar which is introducing EndNote. So we've been talking about manually referencing, and we would highly recommend that you get used to manually referencing before you use any software that will help you to do that, manage your citations. It's really important to get those fundamentals of how your referencing style works. But if you're thinking about EndNote or some other citation management, we can also help you with that as well. And there is a webinar for that next week, Introduction to EndNote. If you come into our previous webinars, there's also lots of other webinars about referencing and other library help. And if you go to our You on Library channel, you can see all of those APA referencing videos that are embedded in that detailed guide. The full guide are also on our YouTube channel, so you can come in that way. So there's heaps of referencing support there.